Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer is in The Hague today. No, he's not on trial. He's trying to get European leaders to back his new plan for a new security agreement. He says he treats criminal gangs as seriously as we treat terrorists. In a press release, he said the reality is that Britain's borders and immigration system are being run by a hostile and growing foreign power, criminal smuggling gangs on the continent. My Labour government will be twice as ruthless to smash the gangs and secure British borders. Tough talk indeed, but critics have slammed Keir Starmer's proposals, which they claim could end up with Britain taking in loads of migrants from the EU as part of a returns agreement. Home Secretary Sorelle Braverman reacted to the comments, saying the Labour leader would make Britain the dumping ground for many of the millions of illegal migrants that Europe doesn't want. And none of this will stop the boats. And House of Commons leader Penny Mordaunt made a rather cheeky Barbie analogy earlier today.
I think the Labour leader is Beach Ken. Beach Ken stands for nothing on shifting sands, in his flip-flops, staring out to sea, doing nothing constructive to stop small boats or grow the economy. And when we examine his weak record on union demands, on border control, on protecting the public and stopping small boats, we discover that, like Beach Ken, he has zero balls.
Well, joining me to discuss this is Harjap Singh Bhangal, immigration lawyer and friend of the show. Hi, Harjap. How are you doing? I mean, tough talk from Sir Keir Starmer. You have often said in previous interviews that actually the way to stop the boats would be to target the criminal gangs. I wonder why this is not being done already.
It probably is, but not with the zest that it needs to be done and not with the infrastructure and cooperation that it needs to be done. These gangs are very sophisticated. Remember, there's more money made in people smuggling than there is in drug smuggling. However, with Sir Keir's plans, he seems to state that they're going to go to the route rather than just the French coast, and actually going to go to places like the Slovak Republic, where the initial crossings take place, and invest in sort of relationships with the EU counterparts to try and treat these gangs as terrorism, including freezing their funds, freezing their assets, and giving them life sentences, which isn't done currently. So assets aren't frozen. Remember, the whole game behind this, the whole aim is money. Money is the only motivation behind for the gangs. Once you start freezing their money and you start giving them life sentences, then perhaps that might act as a deterrent where everything else has failed.
I mean, do you believe him? Because frankly speaking, the EU hasn't been able to put a stop to this themselves already. We know that this is a huge international operation when you've got illegal gangs transiting people from the Middle East, from Africa, from the Maghreb. Why does Keir Starmer think that he alone can actually sort out some sort of arrangement with the EU and stop this?
Well, I think recently the EU also seemed to have had enough with the migration. If you have a look at countries like Germany, even people in France, Italy, what's happening in Italy, you've seen the scenes there. And they realise that there's a big problem and the gangs have to be stopped if they want the current governments want to be re-elected again. So it's not just a matter of Sir Keir. And I think once you have the political will of a lot of other countries who realise, hold on, we might lose elections, or, you know, we might lose face if we don't do to stop these gangs, then I think you'll find a big collective political will manage to achieve what hasn't been done so far.
I mean, do you suspect that the Conservative government are right in the accusation that in order for the UK to be part of any efforts to stop the gangs, we're going to have to sign up to some sort of agreement to take hundreds of thousands of migrants, is what they've said in their social media posts and what the Prime Minister said today in return for that agreement?
I don't think the Conservatives have any sort of leg to stand on, considering they've done the same in the Rwanda agreement. Remember, Rwanda isn't a one-way agreement. We have to take people from Rwanda as well. So if we're sending 100, we'll probably have to take 100. So the Conservatives have done exactly the same. And they also failed after they did the negotiations post-2016 to sign any return agreements with any European countries. We held all the cards there. We were paying the money for the divorce bill as such as it is. And we could have negotiated return agreements, but we didn't. We've only got 6 return agreements in the last 7 years. And you can't send people back to countries if you don't have return agreements. We needed about 200 return agreements. That's a failure on the Conservative government's part. So for them to sort of allege this, that we're going to be letting loads in, well, they're letting loads in anyway at the moment. They haven't stopped anyone. And The irony is the Conservatives haven't even sent any back. The Labour government, last time it was in power, was sending back 60,000 people a year. The Conservatives last year sent back enforced removals about 3,000. Now, 50,000 people coming a year isn't a problem if you're sending 60 back, but if 50,000 people coming a year is a problem if you're only sending 3,000 back.
I mean, we have been sending people back to Albania after a returns agreement with their government. Why do you think it is that the Conservative government haven't been able to secure a similar arrangement with other countries?
I just don't know. I mean, that's something we need to ask the Conservative government. And whenever we ask them, or whenever someone like yourself asks them, they don't have an answer for it. They seem to just deflect with the usual sort of rhetoric. It's a failure on their part. They should have negotiated this. Now, if you want to negotiate anything with any EU country, of course, they're going to hold all the cards. So it's going to be quid pro quo. But the fact is that if migrants fear that, hold on, under the new agreement, 60,000 can be returned, then perhaps that might act as a deterrent, because at the moment, they know they're not going to get returned. 50,000 people know that if they come over, only 3,000 are going back. However, if 50,000 people coming over realize, hold on, 60,000 might be going back, it might act as a deterrent. The only thing that wasn't mentioned by Sir Keir was any safe routes. And currently there aren't any. The Conservatives haven't got any. And Sir Keir didn't seem to mention any sort of plan for safe routes either.
Harjap, thank you ever so much. Let's get reaction to this now with my panellists, the News Movement's Head of News, Rebecca Hudson, and Conservative commentator Benedict Spence. I mean, Harjap Singh Bhangal talking about safe routes there. It's something that we often hear those people opposed to the Conservative plans flag up. Some people would argue, well, we've got safe routes, don't we? We had people coming from Hong Kong. We had arrangements to get people out of Afghanistan. We've taken in a lot of people from Ukraine. No one seems to be able to put meat on the bones of what a safe route other than those would look like.
Well, firstly, they need to probably incorporate other countries beyond those three, because there are, I wouldn't want to be in Yemen particularly, I wouldn't want to be in Sudan particularly very much right now, I wouldn't want to be in Libya. So I think kind of making it, having more places where you can get a safe route from, and that will immediately reduce the amount of people risking their lives crossing the channel, because if you don't come from one of those three countries like you've mentioned, you kind of have no choice but to enter this country on irregular means. So I think that's a huge, a huge thing that would help, and also stemming the problems at the source in the first place. Us kind of investing in humanitarian and international development overseas will stop people wanting to leave areas of conflict, areas of famine, areas affected by climate change. So there's a lot that we could be doing proactively, as well as all the brilliant stuff that Keir Starmer's outlined today.
Benedict, I can see the face you're pulling. You don't agree with that at all. And tell me, what is on your mind about this? I mean, do you think that we risk, under Sir Keir Starmer, sleepwalking into an arrangement with the EU where they will promise to stop illegal migration into the UK, which they could do anyway, and they're not doing it, and it will end up with hundreds of thousands coming here because we have to take that amount?
It's an attempt to try to play both sides. There's the language that Keir Starmer used there. It's a foreign power that are sort of, causing this. It's criminal gangs. Tick. What he thinks the right wing in the Red Wall wants to hear about sovereignty and securing the borders. But it's all about making peace with the EU, doing trade. So he's then appealing also to the Europhiles.
Well,
he's trying to play both sides.
He's to meet Macron, isn't he?
Yeah, he is, although he doesn't even have that kind of charisma, if we're going to be completely honest. But this is the problem. It is going to fail because this is not something that you can stop by signing a deal with the EU. I mean, just today, for example, the footage that's coming out of Lampedusa in the Mediterranean, which is an island with a population of 6,000, where 8,000 people have turned up in the last 4 days, and that's expected to hit 10,000 before the week is out. All of those people, they're coming to Europe. The Italians don't want them. They don't particularly want to be in Italy. They want to come here. It isn't going to be one of those situations where we go to the EU, OK, we'll take 100,000, but you'll stop it at that, right? And they'll go, yeah, sure, why not? We'll stop at that.
But this
it's not
is the
going to work.
problem, isn't it, Rebecca? I mean, you talk about having safe routes, but surely we still have to cap the number, because if you listed a lot of countries, those countries have huge populations. If you look at how many people around the world are facing famine, facing conflict, facing civil unrest, you're talking about 3/4 of the global population almost. We can't take them all.
No, absolutely not. And I don't think that Keir Starmer is suggesting an unlimited number, and I think a cap is healthier for all of us, rather than this kind of nonsense policy at the moment of just stopping the boats, which is literally impossible unless there are legitimate means for people getting in the country, and unless we actually do tackle the criminal gangs who are the reason that people are crossing. That is the unlimited number. He's talking about having an arrangement with the EU where we take our fair share, but equally we then get returns agreements with all these other countries who don't want to talk to us.
But that might be a pull factor, right?
OK, for a start, it's not impossible to stop the boats. It just requires money and a bit of backbone. Other countries do it.
Had 13 years and they haven't done a very good job.
Nobody's denying that they don't have the backbone to do this. I'm saying that all it requires is some backbone and some money, but we don't have that. But you can stop the boats. You can also put people on aeroplanes and send them back to their countries, because those countries countries are not
can't.
going to shoot those planes out of the sky. India is not going to do it. Albania is not going to do it. Turkey is not going to do it. We also need to recognise, actually, as you said earlier, there is a lot of money involved in this. There's a great deal to be made, and it's not just being made by criminal gangs. It's also being made by politicians and political parties in certain countries. Look at the countries where a lot of these gangs operate and originate. Albania, Lebanon, and not an actual country, but one that wants to be, Kurdistan. Actually, there is a lot of money to be made for political causes there, and that is why we have to look at this and say it is not enough to just say to the European Union, can you guys help us out? Because that isn't the core of the problem.
Very quickly, is the problem not that the more we actually show that we are accommodating desperate people, the more desperate people will try to come?
No, not at all. I mean, the idea that everyone crosses Europe to come to Europe, to England, is just not the UK. It's just not true. People who speak the language and have family ties to a community here come. They also settle all over Europe, as we see. So, no, of course not. But we need to do our fair share. But we also need to work with our European partners to take our fair share and also then return the people that don't.
What you said earlier, 3/4 of the population is facing war starvation. That's not true. They do have food, they have jobs, and they have the internet in a lot of these places. And that's why they're coming here, because they see actually that life is a lot better in the West. And this is the problem. You let that genie out of the bottle and you start saying not just wars that we were involved in, any war, and also climate change, and also who knows what other myriads. Oh, there's been a despot in this country, we've got to let them in. When do you stop? When do you actually stop and say, no, chaps, it's time to take responsibility for your country? You've been independent from France or Britain for almost a century. It's time you sorted out your own country. You have the resources. It's time you did something about it.
Do you know, I think it's an argument that we're never going to find a solution to.